think, inside that we need so much. The sight of a touch, or the scent of a sand, or the strength of an oak with roots deep in the ground. The wonder of flowers to be covered and then to burst up through tarmac to the sun again, or to fly to the sun without burning a wing, to lie in a meadow and hear the grass sing, to have all these things in our memories hoard, and to use them to help us to find.
Take a ride? To talk with Art Bell, call the Wildcard line at area code 775-727-1295. The first-time caller line is area code 775-727-1222. To talk with Art Bell from east of the Rockies, call toll-free 800-825-5033. From west of the Rockies, call 800-618-8255. International callers may reach Art by calling your in-country Sprint access number, pressing option 5, and dialing toll-free 800-893-0903. From coast to coast and worldwide on the Internet, this is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell.
Well, heck, folks, the ride is half the fun. People keep saying, are we there yet? Well, the ride is half the fun, and the ride is what you're on right now. Good morning, I'm Art Bell. My guest is Professor Michio Kaku, who is one of our nation's premier theoretical physicists, and the big, broad smile I have is still there. To hear what all of you have said to me, and then to hear this coming from the professor, I don't know, there's just too many parallels. Wicket from Minnesota writes, yes, shadow matter, shadow people, parallel universes, upper and lower planes that someday we're going to be able to travel to. More from the psychic spiritual world. I've done it. I know. Or John, I myself sit at my computer at night, and every now and then I see these shadow beings out of the corner of my eye. I know. Eyes out there are rolling, and it goes on and on. Yup, I see shadow mice when I'm sitting in front of the computer. And I'm glad I'm not losing my mind. Well, Kathy, I can't guarantee that, but you never know. And people just go on and on. I get these computer messages, Tom, Johnson City, New York. Art, you just described me. I've been seeing shadows, spent an awful lot of time at the computer. So it's just, waves of agreement with that out there, and me too. I don't think it's so strange to imagine that what, for example, the Hopi have been saying, what others have been saying, things that we regard as lore and the metaphysical, things that people have seen that are inexplicable. If what Professor Kaku is saying right now, then maybe they're not so inexplicable. Maybe there will be a meeting of science and the metaphysical. What do you think?
Everyone.
Okay, so gravity, if I'm correct, I think I am, is a function of mass, right? Gravity is mass, or it comes from mass. You have mass, you have gravity. And so what Dr. Kaku is saying, I think, is that we're detecting the gravity, which means something is there, but doggone it, we can't see it. But the fact that there's gravity there indicates that there's mass there. So that means there probably is another universe there. Dr. Kaku, if we tried to imagine what the nature of this universe might be like, is that so impossible as to not even be worth a try, or can you make guesses at what it might be like?
Well, this is a very active area of theoretical physics. We physicists create universes with our equations, and each universe, we think, could be a well-defined parallel universe. String theory predicts millions of different kinds of universes. And we think that our universe is one of the universes predicted by string theory. Millions, billions of universes can be found within string theory.
Would there be any similarity, do you suppose, in nearby universes? Would there be any commonality in the fact that they were nearby, or would the next universe be as likely as different as A to Z?
Well, most of the universes, we think, in the multiverse, in fact, that's what my book is all about the multiverse. In the multiverse, most universes are probably dead, in the sense they're lifeless. They probably consist of electrons, neutrinos, lightning bolts, but not much more than that. However, some of them probably look just like our universe. They probably have stable matter, stable protons, meaning stable DNA. And if you have DNA, then, of course, there's a possibility of creating life in these universes. And as we mentioned, there is one theory that says that when these hypernovas take place and all this matter implodes at one point, the matter blows out the other end, creating a universe which is actually quite similar.
Well,
quite similar to our universe.
Okay, all right. Remember when you and I discussed what might happen if you went back in time and committed a no-no of some sort, that instantly another universe would be formed, a bubble on a bubble, so to speak, something like that, right?
That's right.
Okay, well then, wouldn't it stand to reason that if time travel had been going on, we might be accompanied by several other universes that are very much like ours if there have been a series of time travel accidents?
Yeah, this is the many worlds theory.
Yes, sir.
In which case, at every event, the universe has to make a choice, and both universes spring into existence. This resolves the famous Schrodinger cat problem. That is, how is it possible to have a cat that is simultaneously dead and alive? In quantum physics, we do this all the time with electrons, and that's called laser beams and electronics. The entire electronic age depends upon the fact that electrons can be two places at the same time. They can disappear, reappear someplace else because of uncertainty.
Right.
And the entire electronic age does this. However, the question is, if electrons do that in a laser, can we do this as people? We are large objects, and can we be two places at the same time? And according to the many worlds theory, the answer is yes. That is, the universe splits in half every time a different kind of decision has to be made.
Well, that would create a number then of very similar but somewhat different in minutia. I mean, it could be the same except for some very small.
One quantum event separating us from that parallel universe.
One quantum event.
Like a cosmic ray that went through Hitler's mother. If a cosmic ray went through Hitler's mother and Hitler was never born, perhaps World War II didn't take place. And 50 million people didn't have to die.
So there could be worlds in which a World War II never happened, Hitler never happened, but otherwise we what?
In other words, in the many worlds theory, it says that in your room, in the privacy of your room, there is the wave function of dinosaurs. There's the wave function of aliens. There's the wave function of a world where the Nazis won World War II. Think of radio. In your room, there are many radio frequencies that fill your room, but your radio is only tuned to one frequency, the Art Bell Show. But you simultaneously exist with all these radio frequencies in the room, but you're tuned to only one. According to the many worlds theory, in the very room that you reside in right now, there is a wave function of dinosaurs, because that comet missed us 65 million years ago. There's the wave function of pirates, because pirates were not exterminated centuries ago. There's the wave function of Nazi stormtroopers beating down people's door.
Okay.
We exist simultaneously with these wave functions.
That's so fascinating. Before you would be able to transport a human being from one to another, as you pointed out, very complicated. But if we can have light in two places at one time, then somewhere along the line it seems like we could have information in two places at one time. So couldn't we imagine a situation where somebody invented, say, a television screen or, whatever it would be, plasma at least, I suppose, and we could look at a parallel world as it happened? In other words, the transfer of information. Well,
it's not so easy because according to string theory...
Well, I never said it was easy.
Right. According to string theory, our sheet of paper, we are prisoners of our sheet of paper. That is light, matter, electrons. Even though electrons dance many places at the same time inside our PCs, in our universe, they're confined like a prison to our universe. However, gravity is the only force.
I was going to say, what about modulated gravity?
Well, in my book, I actually discussed the question of what it would take in order to create holes,
yes,
which would allow us to see what's on the other side of the universe.
Yes.
And to do this, you have to do what is called boiling space. If I have a microwave oven, for example, and I turn up the microwave oven, I boil water, I turn it up some more, and the water dissolves into hydrogen and electrons and protons. I turn it up some more, and the protons dissolve into quarks. I turn it up some more until I hit what is called the Planck temperature. At the Planck temperature, even space itself begins to boil. Space itself becomes unstable at the Planck temperature, and bubbles begin to form, except these are not bubbles of water, they're bubbles of space. And each bubble is then a gateway to another universe.
Holy mackerel. What is this Planck temperature, by the way?
Oh, it's fabulous. You're talking about 10 to the 19 billion electron volts, which is a quadrillion times more intense than more energetic than our most powerful atom smasher. But again, in my book, I speculate that far in the future, when the universe gets very cold, and the universe will die trillions of years from now as it gets very cold in a big freeze, civilizations do not have to die when the universe dies trillions of years from now in a big freeze. Civilizations will be type 3, type 4, type 5 by then, and they will boil space. They will create machines, and in fact, I give blueprints for what these machines may look like in my book.
Really?
Yeah, in the last chapters, I give detailed blueprints of the temperature, the size, the energies necessary to boil space, to create a microwave oven with enough temperature, enough pressures and temperatures and densities and energies, so that space itself begins to boil, wormholes begin to form, bubbles begin to form, each bubble being a gateway to one of these neighboring universes.
And an escape.
An escape. Now, I also point out that if you calculate the size of these wormholes, most calculations that we do show that they're very small. However, perhaps in the future, if they're just big enough to shoot molecules through,
yes,
an advanced civilization may shoot nanobots through this tiny hole. These nanobots are molecular robots, and they would land on an asteroid and create factories to create carbon copies of themselves like a virus, and they would form a DNA factory. And the DNA factory would then clone their own masters in this other parallel universe.
Holy mackerel.
So even though their bodies may perish as their old universe dies and gets very old, they may send nanobots through this bubble to a younger universe to recreate their race, which then leaves the question open.
Fairly egotistical on their part, I might add.
What happens if one of these universes dies and they go into our universe? Our universe is still pretty young.
Right.
We can see the end, of course. Our instruments can see the time when our universe will die. However, our universe is still warm and is still young. And perhaps one day, in desperation, a neighboring universe will send a lifeboat through one of these holes and visit our universe. And
they wouldn't necessarily have our best interests in mind.
Well, they'll be, by that time, type 4. They'll be beyond galactic, and I think by then they'll have resolved all their sectarian, religious, fundamentalist, racial passions. They will have had millions of years of existence since rising out of the swamp, and I would assume by then they will have the wisdom that goes along with this incredible technology of being type 3 or extragalactic being type 4.
But does even greater wisdom assure that it would be benign from our point of view? Not necessarily, right?
Well, we are type 0. We're quite savage in terms of our instincts. Whenever Arthur C. Clarke once said that there either is or is not intelligent life in outer space, either thought is frightening.
Yes, it is.
Either thought is frightening, because if there is intelligent life in outer space, we're suspicious of them. we get very antsy and very worried about their intentions.
Well, Professor, they should be there, shouldn't they? I mean...
I think they're out there. I think
indeed. From your point of view, with what you know about really what is out there, which is far more than the average person, to imagine that, just the sheer numbers alone wouldn't dictate that it would happen is almost unimaginable.
Well, in the year 2014, NASA is going to send the terrestrial planet finder into orbit. It will detect 500 Earth-like planets in neighboring constellations.
There you go.
And this is in 2014, not that far away, when NASA will have a probe sensitive enough to detect 500 Earth-like planets in nearby constellations. And we will have an existential shock with our little telescopes looking up, knowing that perhaps somebody's looking back at us from one of these Earth-like planets in outer space.
With that many Earth-like planets, what are the calculated odds that, or is there even any way of calculating such odds that at least one of them would harbor life?
Well,
intelligent life.
In our nearby sector of the galaxy, that's what the terrestrial planet finder will find, these 500 Earth-like planets.
That's still quite a few.
Right. However, in the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy has 100 billion stars, and we believe that about half of them, up to half, may have solar systems. The other half are probably double stars and therefore uninteresting. But perhaps half of the 100 billion stars in our own backyard have planetary systems, of which maybe 10% have Earth-like planets.
Why are the double stars uninteresting?
They're probably unstable. If I have like two stars chasing each other, like chasing each other's tail,
yes.
Two stars chasing each other,
right.
Then a planet would have to be very, very far away to orbit around this double star system. If it gets too close, it'll be ripped apart. So triple star systems are very uncommon. The nearest star to the Earth, by the way, is Alpha Centauri, which is part of a triple star system. But the nearest star to the Earth is a triple star system, but again, it's two stars chasing each other's tail, with the third star being quite far away. So a planetary system like that would be probably unstable. But we think that about half the planets, half the stars in the night sky are solitary, without partners, and that means that perhaps 50% of the stars you see at night could have solar systems, and perhaps 10% of them have Earth-like planets. And
so
like
that's a gigantic number then. So
it's astronomical.
Yes. So then a person like yourself would almost have to lean in the very high percentages that life is likely, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are, of course, reasons for believing that even Earth-like planets may be unstable. For example, you have to have a large Jupiter-sized planet accompanying it to throw out comets and meteors, to clean out like a vacuum cleaner.
So you don't get destroyed by a rock.
Right. Also, you have to have a large moon because our Earth may actually tumble without the moon. The moon stabilizes the Earth. Without the moon, the Earth would have tumbled, making life very difficult on the Earth as the axis tilts and wobbles.
Okay, but again, just the sheer numbers alone indicate there are going to be situations like that.
Oh, I think it's without question.
I mean, even now, we're leaning toward discoveries that are suggesting there's life on Mars, microbial perhaps, but life on Mars. That's just our nearest number one neighbor. So if that's the case, then life must be common. If it's common, well, then, of course, I get down the line a little bit, and I say, okay, fine, then where the hell is it? Why haven't we heard somebody knock?
Well, my attitude is that if they really are type 3, that is, if they're galactic, and they really have the energy capable of going between star systems, which means they have access to the Planck energy, that would mean that the distance between them and us is like the distance between us and an anthill. And we don't visit anthills too often, right? We don't give beads to them, trinkets to ants.
No, but I mean, I'm sure that when you were a child, I know I did. I leaned down and I watched.
That's on a few of them, right?
Well, I did, but mostly I looked at them and the industrious little suckers carrying these giant hunks of bread and stuff. It's interesting, so I stared at them.
But for how long? We're type 0. A type 3 civilization would stare at us for a little bit and then get bored very quickly. Wow. And then simply walk away. Type 0 civilizations are probably dime a dozen in the galaxy.
Why would you, it sounds like you imagine that a type 3 is benign, peaceful, past all of the political, religious hang-ups that the world has right now. Why do you make that assumption?
Well, because we evolved on a very savage earth. Resources were scarce, food was scarce, shelter was scarce, mates were scarce, and the way we got access to shelter and food and mates was by force. We have a very, it was only a short while ago, a few million years, that we were really savages in the forest. And a Type 3 civilization would have had perhaps 1 million years of evolution away from their savage past.
Or that much savagery, and, they're the winners. I don't know.
And the search for resources, the search for energy, the search for mates, that would not be first and foremost in their mind, I think.
All right.
So that's why I think that by the time they're Type 3, they are going to be benign.
Well, okay. Professor, hold on. We're at the top of the hour. Being the Type 0 I am, I still have to take commercial and news breaks. That's all right, because it brings you all of this. From the high desert, this is Coast to Coast AM. I'm Art Bell.
Talk with Art Bell. Call the wildcard line at area code 775-727-1295. The first-time caller line is area code 775-727-1222. To talk with Art Bell from east of the Rockies, call toll-free at 800-825-5033. From west of the Rockies, call Art at 800-618-8255. International callers may reach Art Bell by calling your in-country Sprint access number, pressing option 5. And dialing toll-free 800-893-0903. From coast to coast and worldwide on the Internet, this is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell.
With one of the smartest people in the world. My guest is Dr. Michio Kaku, and he is indeed one of the world's leading theoretical physicists. It's fascinating to listen to, so I suggest you stay right where you are. Once again, Dr. Michio Kaku. All right, I guess we better do this. Mark in East Lansing, Michigan, obviously may not have heard our early programs, Professor, and simply asked, what is a Type 3 civilization life form as opposed to, say, a Type 1 you were just talking about? Please explain. Now, you've done that a number of times, but there are new people out there, so by all means.
Okay, and before I do that, let me just mention my webpage, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
It's www.mkaku.org, mkaku.org. And you can see a description of my new book, Parallel Worlds. And I'd like to thank Michael Phillips and Corey for setting up the webpage. They've done a great job monitoring the webpage. 40 million hits on that webpage so far.
40 million hits.
A fraction of your number of hits, of course.
Well...
I'm sure a lot of my hits are spillovers from yours.
Happy to be delivering whatever hits you can take.
Okay. Well, briefly, a Type 1 civilization is a planetary civilization that harnesses planetary power. They control the weather. They would control earthquakes, and that tsunami, for example, that devastated the Indian Ocean, that would be easily controlled by a Type 1 civilization that controls anything planetary.
All right, stopping there for a second, folks. He's describing a Type 1. We are a zero.
We're zero. We get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal.
Right.
We cannot predict we can barely predict the weather, let alone modify it or change it. We're at the mercy of earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis. Type 1 is about 100 years away from us in technology, but they control planetary forces.
That's not very far, 100 years.
Not very far. You can see the beginnings of it. You know, the Internet is the beginning of a Type 1 telephone system. That's what the Internet really is. English will be the language of Type 1.
Can you even imagine, Professor, how a Type 1 might have, say, controlled or stopped or prevented or I don't know, whatever, with that tsunami?
Well, first of all, they would be able to look inside the Earth. We're very primitive in terms of using earthquake waves to monitor the inside of the Earth. They'd be able to look inside the Earth and be able to predict well ahead of time and be able to release the energy slowly of these earthquakes before they build up. And we're at the mercy of these forces because we cannot see inside the Earth. However, with supercomputers, with sensors, and eventually neutrino telescopes, we may be able to actually see inside the Earth.
But how would even a Type 1 civilization control the movement of tectonic plates against each other? That's what it is, right?
Yeah, well, for example, it's known that if you flood certain areas, just ordinary water will loosen some of the fault lines and actually initiate some rumbles in the fault. They would be able to precisely, in three-dimensional geometry, locate where all the pressure points are and relieve them using water, lubricants, or whatever kinds of advanced technology they have. They would know exactly where the pressure points are, relieve them so they're not going to build up, so the tectonic plates slide over each other without locking.
Is there
locking of these plates?
Yes. Is there research like that going on, Professor? I've heard little bits and pieces about injecting water and its effect.
It's very primitive because we don't know where the pressure points are. Just only in the last few years have we got the first map of the inside magma of the Earth. If you were actually to look at the core of the Earth and see all the streams of magma, it sort of looks like an onion with thin tendrils coming out of the onion. I was quite shocked when I saw that picture. We have just a rough approximation now of all the magma channels that are inside the Earth. Very rough picture.
That's fascinating.
I was quite astonished when I saw that picture.
How far down do we have knowledge of?
Well, this picture was taken of the entire core of the planet Earth, and it was done by looking at supercomputer analysis of waves caused by earthquakes as they went through the planet Earth itself, bounced off different layers, and then using a supercomputer to reconstruct in 3 dimensions the shape of all the junk inside the Earth.
Okay, so this is kind of on a scale of what a geologist does when they're looking for oil. They drop some dynamite in a hole, they let her rip, and then they